So our first session is going to be looking at general healthy eating guidelines, macronutrients, so different food groups, and where we get different nutrients from and why they're important to us. So we're just going to show you an example of what a healthy eating plate would look like. So there we go. We've got the healthy plate up there. So, Sue, did you want to go through what some of these food groups are about?
Yeah, I think the use of something like this is it gives us a visual idea of what our main plate of food should look like. So typically this would be your evening meal and the different proportions of the different food groups. So this information we're not taught about at school. Things like carbohydrates and protein are talked about a lot, aren't they? But we don't really fully understand what they mean. I think a lot of people don't understand that vegetables and fruit are carbohydrates. They just think about maybe bread or pasta or sugar. So this really helps us to understand a little bit more about those macronutrients, as you said. So in our evening meal, we'd be looking at eating roughly half of our plate would be vegetables. This gives us a form of carbohydrate, but also lots of fibre too. About a quarter of our plate would be starchy foods. So these would be potatoes, rice, pasta, those sort of things. And then about a quarter of it would be protein. So this doesn't have to be meat protein. So it could be eggs, it could be cheese, but it also could be vegetable protein. So thinking of our whole grains, beans and pulses, nuts and seeds, those sort of things. And then not forgetting healthy fats. Fats have been given a really bad press over the last few decades. And when we look at a really healthy model of eating, we maybe think about the Mediterranean diet, which would be full of healthy fats. So things like oily fish, olive oil, maybe things like avocado, nuts and seeds. So those would make up a balanced plate of food. One of the things I tend to use a lot is, thinking about maybe a plate of spaghetti bolognese. And typically we'd have most of that plate would be pasta with a little blob of sauce in the middle, wouldn't it?
Top, exactly, yeah. It should be the other way around, shouldn't it, ideally?
Yeah, absolutely. So often it's not that we're eating the wrong things, but it's the proportions are wrong. So our healthy plate here and the guidelines just help us to understand some real basic principles. So eating a rainbow of colours, and we're going to come on to that on one of our other videos, including protein at every meal. And as I say, this doesn't have to be meat protein or animal protein. Choosing brown instead of white. And I think this is a really, again, something we know we should have brown bread instead of white, but a lot of people don't understand why.
Yeah. And what is it in the brown bread? It's the fibre.
Yeah, and things like the vitamins and minerals that are in those husks. So if we think of wheat or a jacket potato, for instance, all the goodness is really on the outside skin. And because it's full of fibre, it's more filling as well. So that's why we say brown instead of white. The guidelines are 8 to 10 portions of fruit or veg a day. And this sounds a lot.
Because we get used to hearing 5 a day, don't we? But actually, it's not quite right. Yeah.
And the 5 a day message has been out for about 25 years now.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. And it was always 10 portions a day, but they thought, that's not realistic. No one's going to do that. So we'll tame it down to 5. What we found is that actually people are a long way off even getting 5. So they said, well, actually, these are the guidelines. This is what we know through evidence base, that 8 to 10 portions gives us the different nutrients that we need in our diet. So that's an optimal thing to aim for. And then we've got oily fish for those essential fatty acids in there. So that's basically what we're aiming for. And I often say that there's sort of an 80-20% rule, that, you know, we're trying to get to this 80% of the time, but sometimes we won't, and that's okay.
And you've got the water. We've got the water in there as well, which is important to mention. Yeah.
And you know, this is really important too. Water is so important for our health, isn't it? For our brain health, brain to function properly, for our bowels to function properly, and for our immune system. Often completely overlooked. And this is where, for an average person, we're looking about 1.5 litres a day. And what I would say is, you know, keep a glass or a bottle with you and just sip it throughout the day. Initially, it takes our body a while to get used to having more liquid. So we might find ourselves going to the toilet a bit more often for the first week, but then we adjust.
I'll definitely calm down. I've had a lot of people say that to me, that, yeah, initially it's, you know, non-stop trips to the toilet, but definitely it does tend to calm down, and then they get quite used to it and they adapt. So yeah.
And it's then that we start actually recognizing that we're thirsty as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's a really good thing to remember. If we're overeating or we're snacking a lot, I think to think, am I thirsty or am I hungry?
Yeah.
Because often those messages are a little bit mixed, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, there's, you know, you can have a bottle next to you and sip it through the day, and there's lots of other creative ways to you know, try and drink more water through the day. I try and put sometimes make my own iced tea. So, you know, put a tea bag, a herbal tea bag, and yeah, it's really easy to do, and keep it in the fridge, and that encourages me to drink more water. So yeah, there's that.
And especially with people being more at home now, you know, having a jug with some cucumber in there or some mint from the garden, and having it cold. A lot of people don't like sort of warm water to drink, but a cold glass of water is quite refreshing.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, sorry, we've just got the portion guide here as well. And I think this can be quite useful, especially if you've got children, to understand what a portion is for you. So it's just a guideline, but it's looking at the size of the palm of your hand as a portion. So for an adult, it would be 1 carrot or 3 or 4 broccoli florets. And obviously for a child, the child's hand is smaller, so it would be a lesser amount. So to get half of that plate vegetables, you might be looking at 1 carrot, 3 or 4 broccoli florets, and a tablespoon or 2 of peas. And that would give you your half a plate.
And there you've got your three portions of veg already just in one meal. So working towards that 10 a day seems more achievable.
Absolutely.
And just looking briefly at some sources of these nutrients. So if we look at protein-rich foods, what are some of the examples of good sources of protein that you can mention?
So when we're looking at meat, for instance, if we start there, you know, quality is definitely best over quantity, if we're able to choose that. And we want foods that are not processed. So ideally, if you're going to buy sausages, buy them from the butcher. Go for things that are maybe gluten-free because they've got a higher meat content in them, and make your own burgers because they're so easy and much cheaper. Definitely. So I would definitely go for quality over quantity in that respect. But remembering that there's other forms of protein there. So we've got meat and fish initially, and then things like eggs are a fantastic protein source. Even places like Lidl sell organic eggs. So they're, you know, available for everyone. Dairy is a source of protein, but also things like beans, pulses, frozen peas, lentils, nuts and seeds. So there's lots of ways that we can add protein in that isn't animal based. I use maybe a little bit of tofu, but I tend to always buy organic tofu if I do. But mixing up these beans and pulses, that gives you a complete protein. And a complete protein is where you've got all of the essential amino acids within there. So one food that sort of sits between the starch and the protein is something like quinoa, which is a complete protein. So that can be a really easy way to bulk out foods.
And that's quite a nice one to use for different types of things. You could have it as a breakfast, you know, you could have it as a salad for a lunch. You could add it to stews and, you know, have it sort of part of your evening meal. I think it's quite versatile. It's quite a good one to try.
Yeah, and it bulks things out, doesn't it? It makes food go further.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, when we're looking at protein rich foods, these tend to be the more expensive aspect of our meal. So if we can make it go further by being a little bit clever with using things like lentils or quinoa or, you know, cashew nuts in a stir fry, for instance, making it go further, that could be really good.
Okay. And then if we look at starchy food, so you mentioned before that's bread and things like that, but also there are other sources. What about potatoes? Yeah. Potatoes fall into starchy foods.
Yep. So I'd always think of potatoes ideally with skins on. So we're in the spring now, so new potatoes are particularly good for that. Things like parsnips, and most of these root vegetables are more starchy based. So always go, as we said, brown instead of white. So this is with your rice, your pasta, etc. It does take a little while to get used to, especially with the kids with brown pasta, but it is much more filling and better for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it is worth having a go there. And I think what we tend to do is we overeat these foods. These are filler foods. And if we think of maybe something like a roast dinner, traditionally, we'd have had roast potatoes and maybe a Yorkshire pudding to bulk out that meal. So we make the meat go further.
Yes.
So what we'd like to do is reduce those a little bit and add more veg in there.
Yeah.
And with potatoes, you know, and one that people get confused about a lot is things like sweet potato. Mm-hmm. So that isn't actually a potato, it's part of the yam family. So it sits more in the vegetable side, and it's got many more nutrients in there, things like beta carotene. It's much higher in fiber, has less impact on your blood sugar level, which we'll talk about later. So that can be a really nice swap to make like sweet potato wedges with a meal instead of chips.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the vegetables and fruits section then.
Yeah, so this is where we talk about eating our rainbow. So with that, I mean looking at a variety of colours. One, because the first part of digestion is actually looking at our food and thinking about it, smelling it, and we start to salivate. And in that saliva are those enzymes that are going to help to break this down. So if it looks appetizing, that's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Different colours have different nutrients, so different properties of vitamins and minerals. So if we eat a diverse range, it's also going to help us to get that diversity of nutrients in our diet.
Yeah, and they all have different functions in the body, which are all equally important and work together. So yeah, really.
Absolutely. And it's about getting that balance. One thing that, you know, the way we shop impacts a lot of the variety that we have. And one thing I say to people is where you can, you know, go to a farmer's market or a local farm that grows vegetables, and you'll start to eat more seasonally and what's in season at the time, rather than in the supermarket we just have the general stuff. Mm-hmm. It's been shown that some of the tribes in Africa, you know, they might have eaten, you know, 300 different varieties of vegetable, fruit, seeds, nuts, etc. over a year. And maybe in the UK, we might only eat about 17 in a year.
Wow.
We
Yeah.
eat the same foods week in, week out, and we shop in the supermarket that has these foods from all over the world instead of eating seasonally.
And it's like when you do if you do online shopping, you know, they make it so easy for you to go to your favorites or the week before, and you just reselect the same stuff every week, no matter what season. Yeah, just quick and easy, but yeah, it's not always the best, is it?
No.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we can eat, you know, so at the moment we've got things like purple sprouting broccoli and maybe spring greens. If we can add those into just our normal broccoli, we're adding in different levels of fiber, different nutrients, and that's all going to help the gut bacteria as well to provide different food for them. So having more diversity over the year is definitely going to be a good thing. And that's something that you can really encourage your kids to get involved in, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think, and just trying to grow things at home, you know, they learn really quickly what you can plant when, and what you pick at what time, and that sort of thing. That's quite a simple thing to do, even on your windowsill. Definitely makes a big difference. And then just briefly looking at the healthy fats, because like you said, fats has obviously got a kind of bad reputation over the years, but we do need them, as you say. So what are some of the healthier ones that you'd recommend?
So things like oily fish, but with this one, I would try and reduce the bigger oily fish. So things like tuna, and go for the more sustainable, smaller ones like mackerel, sardine, pilchards. These have got less of an accumulation of heavy metals in them, and they're more sustainable and cost effective to buy. So that's one thing. The reason that we need these fats in our diet, they're called essential fatty acids, is because every single cell of our body is reliant on these fats. And one particular organ in our body, or aspect of our body, is our brain, and our brain is really hungry for those healthy fats. So when we're looking at things like mood or anxiety or behavioral issues, you know, the brain is really, really important to get those healthy fats in. So other things, they're not seasonal to us, but avocados, and something maybe more easily to get hold of would be nuts and seeds. So all the supermarkets sell amazing ranges of these. So a walnut actually looks like the brain, so they're brilliant. But it could be cashews, it could be almonds, it can be things like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds. These are all rich in those fatty acids that are really beneficial to us.
And again, they make it really easy for us now. By, you know, you can buy ready ground flax seeds and things like that you can sprinkle on your breakfast and put in a smoothie. So really, really good.
Yeah. And they're also crossing over into that protein category as well. So, you know, we can make our breakfast more protein dense by adding those in, and that's going to fill us up, keep us going for longer as well. So they're fantastic. And then we're looking at maybe fats that we cook with. So at home, I always use olive oil. Other fats that I use would be coconut oil and maybe some ghee. I don't know about you. What do you use?
Yeah, coconut oil is my normal go-to for most things. That one, I like the flavor, the type of food I like to cook. Yeah, it goes well with it. And yeah, I'd say mostly that, or olive oil for cooking. Yeah.